Hi, welcome everyone to ECPG Live. Our topic today is Responsible Gaming Roundtable, and we're doing things a little bit differently than we have in the past. We actually have two panels of guests for you today, but before I introduce them, I just want to remind you that people can view both from Facebook and YouTube. You can interact with our guests through the chat feature. And Rob Maya is, as always, behind the scenes, combing through all the comments and questions coming in from both Facebook and YouTube. So you may see your comment or question appear on your screen for our guests to respond to today. Also, don't forget that we have a blog on this post, and already I've got a very long list of resources for you there. And any other resources that come up during our event today, we'll share those there for you as well. So first, I'm going to welcome a few guests to talk about responsible gaming from the player's perspective. We have Julie Hines. She is the executive director of the Oregon Council on Problem Gambling. She's a certified prevention specialist. She's been in the problem gambling field for 18 plus years. She's awesome. Julie, anything else you'd like to add there?
Well, you're awesome. That's what I'd like to add.
Thanks. And also we've got Ricky Pione. She is the Health and Human Services Director for the Spokane Tribe of Indians. She's been in the responsible gaming field for 17 years. She's also a certified gambling counselor and supervisor. So we're very excited to have her expertise with us as well today.
Thank you.
Yeah. So first, let's get started just by laying the groundwork for everybody. We want to make sure everybody kind of knows what we're talking about when we talk about responsible gaming or responsible gambling for players. So Ricky, maybe you could start us off here. What is responsible gaming? If I'm a player and I want to go and I want to play responsibly, what is that?
Well, from the gambler's perspective, if we're going to talk about, what does that look like in responsible gambling and gaming, they would be gambling for pleasure and entertainment, acutely aware of the likelihood of losing and understanding the associated risks with their gambling and gaming. And as well, I would say that individuals who are gaming responsibly exercise some extent of control over their gaming activity, and they have a balance gambling with their activities and their lives without causing problems or harm to themselves and or others, kind of broadly.
Right. And Julie, maybe what are some ways they can set limits or exercise the control over their gambling that Ricky's talking about?
Yeah. So, one of the things that people can do is set a time limit and stick to it. So before they go out to, say, a casino or to play video lottery, what have you, is to set a time. Say, I'm going to spend a couple of hours here, and then stick to it. And then maybe even talk with somebody that they know and say, hey, I just want to check in with you. Will you please remind me after, a couple hours, and kind of just so you have that check-in, that sort of accountability, especially if you think that it's starting to be problematic. The other thing is even more effective, at least as far as the research shows, is setting a dollar limit and sticking to it. So that pre-commitment can be really, really helpful in saying, this is how much I'm going to spend. I'm going to spend $25 tonight. And when I get to 25, win or lose, I'm out the door. And so setting that dollar limit and sticking to that as well is really critical, because the further someone gets in the hole, the more they feel that kind of sunk cost, like, oh, I've lost so much, I got to get it back, and start feeling that chasing kind of desire. And again, I think Ricky already pointed this out, is just expecting to lose. Knowing what the odds are is really an important piece of this as well, because the odds are not in our favor. And even if something says a 97% payback, that's still 3% that a person's losing over time. So just being aware of those odds, even knowing certain games, and sometimes even getting a little bit of knowledge about the game itself can be of help.
So you're saying I shouldn't treat it as an income?
Not to be treated for investment purposes. No. And that's, that's a thing right now, right? Because we're in the middle of this pandemic and people are like, oh, I got my stimulus check. And it could be really tempting to try to say double that income. And that's what we want to say as far as crossing the line of responsible gambling, being entertainment, being social, to crossing that line into sort of risky and problematic behavior is taking that as sort of looking at it as investment purpose.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Are there ways, like what would be some examples of risky gambling, just for the sake of looking at it from that side?
So you want
for either of you?
So yeah, I think just as far as starting to spend more than intended is certainly a huge risk factor. Starting to chase that money, as mentioned before, if you've set that limit and then you kind of go after it and start gambling more. Gambling is a way to cope with emotional pain or escaping problems or hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. Those things can really be, especially right now with people so stressed out, those things can really create that risk and make it more of a risky behavior for people. And then, not really setting balances, understanding when things have become imbalanced, when people are more isolating, they're less interacting with their family and social stuff. They might seem checked out even when they're right in front of you. And maybe gambling on credit. So those are a lot of different kind of risk factors that we might see in somebody that's starting to become, have a problem with their gambling.
Right. And this is Maureen here tuning in. She has a good question here. Can players put limits on their credit cards or player club cards to help them limit their spending?
I cannot say that is happening in all venues, and I can't say that that's happening with all credit card holders or the industry of, the businesses behind each credit card. But I do know that I have heard that some do that. Mm-hmm. And if you're going to go into a venue that I'm aware of, I've seen requests made that a person can request for their player's card to be, I don't know if I'd say limited, but they can put benchmarks on there. Please notify me when this is at this point or things like that. I've seen some, but again, across the whole entire industry, I can't say that those things are happening.
Yeah, so it may be an option. It might be dependent on the facility and their players' club card or policies, but also on the individual. If they're using their credit card or debit card or something, they would have to initiate setting those limits for themselves with their banker. Yeah. And let's see, let's pull up our third question here. So where do responsible gaming practices fall short? So for who would these practices like limit setting and things, who would that really work well for? And when would that not work well for people? Or who might that not work well for? Ricky, you want to take a stab at that one first?
So, that's a difficult question because going back to a little bit of what Julie talked about, gambling for a way to cope, with stress or loneliness or depression, that happens a lot. And so we're really dealing with individuals being aware of mental health things maybe going on in their lives and trauma. And, sometimes they're not aware of that, of why they're gambling and why they're lost in time, in the casino. And so I would say, because we discussed this thing about responsible gaming practices and where they might be falling short, that I would put a huge emphasis on prevention efforts, the outreach, the continued education, the awareness, because as far as I'm dealing with people still in treatment, individuals and families, there is an unawareness of what exactly is going on and what's wrong with me and why can't I stop and why is my loved one doing this and why can't they stop? So it tells me that there's still a lot of information that's not known out there that I think is super important, because when we go back into responsible gaming in the venues, if these individuals don't understand that this could be problematic, that there could be an addiction arising, that all of these negative components could be happening in the future, through this. If they don't understand that it truly is a disorder, if they don't understand that they truly can get help for it, and their family members, then that's kind of an issue for me. So I think we need to go back and really look and continue prevention efforts around this whole thing. So with your question like that, it's hard for me to answer that. Who would it be good for or work best with and things like that. I think we really need to go back to prevention and continue to hammer in what this is. And along with that, I'd like to add, my mind is really racing on this because you've heard me say gambling and gaming. Those words kind of go together. Well, gambling has evolved and it's probably going to continue to evolve. So we're dealing with more than what I was dealing with years ago with the brick and mortar, so to speak, gambling issues and problems. And now we are dealing more in a heightened gaming, video gaming, and online gaming. And so we need to really do a lot of more work around gaining more information and research and data, and then being able to lock in, okay, what works best practices, assessment, treatment modalities, that kind of thing, in order to really move and start addressing this. So it is really complex what we're dealing with, and it continues to evolve, which will also cross over into policy and legislation and all of that. Sorry, Julie, got going there.
No, I think that's fantastic. If I might just add on a little bit to that, and also, yes, prevention. Thank you. Absolutely. I think, in terms of looking at the other end of the continuum of care, or at least further on in the end of the continuum of care, is if those prevention efforts maybe aren't working. So just only doing awareness, for example, or maybe no matter what we're doing, it's still not essentially effective with that person, is then thinking of them further on the continuum. RG, responsible gambling, is not going to work for somebody who is in action with their active gambling problem and that needs further resources. They need that help. It's beyond that point in their brains in which it's going to be effective for them. So offering those resources that are further along the continuum of care for when they get, say, using motivational interviewing approach, saying when they get out of pre-contemplation or saying, I don't have a problem, I don't need help, into maybe thinking about they need help or being ready to need help. That's where those resources then can be more effective in terms of further on in the RG and help. And I think that's where industry can really help out. And we're doing much better job now of partnering with industry. I think as people in the field, we're partnering better together in programs like Game Sense, for example, that really do meet people where they're at and say, hey, how you doing? You want to know about the odds of this game? And then further along is, would you like to self-exclude? So understanding it along the continuum, that a certain RG approach, much like Ricky already said, a certain RG approach isn't for everyone. And so meeting people where they're at is really key there.
Right. And just so you all know, we'll add GameSense as a resource, what she was just talking about. We'll put it as a link on the blog so you can check it out, because it's a really, really great resource to get some of that, what Ricky's talking about, the education pieces about slot machines or this game or that game, about odds and how to play responsibly and all of that kind of stuff. It's a great resource for that. And Maureen asks, are there tools to help family members protect their financial resources when a loved one is gambling? Also a very good question. Either of you want to take a stab at that?
I think that there's many dynamics that could happen, but if a family identifies that a family member may be exhausting all the financial resources, you're either, I would say, what I've seen, going to have to isolate the resources and move them away so that there's somebody else managing those financial resources. But you're going to have the person want to and allow that to happen, unless there's reasons legally that they're unable to do that. But there's tools, as in books and some financial gambling things, for example, that I have, that help align budgets and help, kind of lay out money management practices. Julie?
Perfectly said. Yeah. And I'm sure we have some of those resources available on the blog. Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah. And we can, as I think about it, there's more that come to mind and may add to it. Yeah. And one thing that comes to mind is when I was doing gambling treatment groups before, I'd have clients, we would talk about responsible gaming in the group, right? And some of them would say, I wish I had gotten this education at the beginning, right? When I first started gaming, nobody told me about the odds. Nobody told me that this was even a disorder that could happen to people. I had no idea. And then they'd also say, there's a point where had someone come up to me and said, I'm concerned about your gambling, I might not have listened to them. But then there was also a point later that I prayed for someone to come tell me that they were concerned, right? Like they wanted the responsible gaming interactions, the education, things with the staff. So it was just evident that it was very important from their perspective, just thinking of themselves as customers, right? I want this to be going on. And also, you know, like you're talking about, there wasn't a lot of prevention that they ended up benefiting from in the early stages either. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where the industry can really help with that relationship building and understanding that they have a part to play in it too. It's not just all on the player, but we're all responsible for responsible gambling.
Right. Which that is probably a really good place to start bringing in our next panel, because our next panel is a group of experts from the gaming industry that are really big champions for responsible gaming and can really talk about some of the things going on in the industry here. So Rob, let's bring them in, and we will be bringing Julie and Ricky back. So if you've got more questions for them, we're going to do another Q&A with them at the end with everybody. So stay tuned to hear some more from them. And now we're going to be bringing in, this is Jennifer Shatley and Phyllis Ermey and Kara Fox LaRose. So Jennifer Shatley is the principal consultant with Logan Avenue Consulting. She's been in responsible gaming for 20 plus years, I think.
23.
Yes. She's also been the VP of Responsible Gaming Policies and Compliance with Caesars Entertainment, and she's also one of the trainers for ECPG's Responsible Gaming Certification Program. We also have here Kara Fox LaRose with A. She is the president and general manager of the A Resort, helped launch that several years ago. She's been in the casino and hospitality industry for 24 years. She's also a board member with us at ECPG and a strong proponent of responsible gaming practices. And then also joining us here is Phyllis Ermey with Maverick Gaming. She's the director of regulatory compliance with Maverick. She's been in the industry 16 plus years. We've got a great panel here, guys. And has been with Maverick since 2015. Also a very strong proponent for responsible gaming. And so they're going to get to tell us a little bit about what the industry is doing on all this to help their customers and make this a priority. So let's start with our first question for you guys, which is, why is responsible gaming important? Why is it important for the gambling industry, right? We've talked about why is it important for the player to help prevent future problems, and from your perspective. Kara, do you want to start us off with that one?
Sure. Thank you for having me today. Certainly looking forward to the rest of this discussion. As gaming operators, it's important we understand our impact and remain focused on this topic. Our intention as operators is to offer a form of entertainment in a safe and fun environment. So for most individuals, that is the case, but it's important that we recognize that for some, gambling can become a problem that can cause a significant impact on individuals and their loved ones. And so because some of those behaviors that could be detrimental to individuals are not always obvious, especially when it comes to our mental health and well-being. So we should continue to find ways to ensure we're taking the time to understand these issues and find ways to mitigate any risks that we encounter as we encounter them. And it's certainly easy to embrace the fun technology that continues to evolve in our industry and focus on the hospitality side of our business. However, part of providing the best environment for our guests to engage in responsible recreation is to remain aware of certain consequences that the allure of gaming can have on our guests physically, emotionally, and even financially, which can be difficult to detect. And at times, because our guests may not even know themselves that they may be going down a dangerous path. As operators, it's important we're embracing this just as we would with any other sector of our business, such as alcohol consumption and delivering alcoholic beverages in a measured and monitored way to keep people safe.
Absolutely. Yeah. Jennifer, did you have anything you'd like to piggyback on what she said or anything to add?
I do. So I think when you think about responsible gaming from an industry perspective, it really is about sustainability, not only sustainability of the customer base because of the harms that could potentially happen, but it's also about employee engagement, employee morale. If employees are encountering this on the floor every day, they need to have processes to deal with that and to help customers. They're not these callous individuals that are just there to suck all the money out of somebody. They live in the communities with their customers. They care about them. They want to take care of them. It's all about customer service when you're in the gaming industry. And part of that customer service is responsible gaming. And it really can affect customer loyalty. It can benefit your brand. And then also, I think the legitimacy of the industry hinges on responsible gaming and how we deal with the issue. Because when you look at new jurisdictions that are legalizing gambling, for instance, Japan, the number one question is always, what are you going to do about problem gambling? How are you going to deal with that issue? Anytime we are looking to grow the industry, this is the question that's going to come up, and we better have good policies and practices in place to deal with that issue.
Yeah. Any other thoughts from you, Phyllis?
No, I agree. Training is a big part of it, and the customer service and knowing what to look for. That's all great stuff to touch on that.
And Kara, I like how you mentioned it's kind of like with selling alcohol. You want to be responsible with that. This is very similar. You want to be responsible when it's gambling that's the product, so to speak, things like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I do see a question that's come in for Kara. I don't know if we want to bring it in. It's going to be a little bit long, or we could answer it on the blog afterward. I'll let Rob decide that. Sometimes when they come in real big, it ends up taking up space, but we will make sure all of the questions get answered either in here or in our little Q&A afterwards. So we'll make sure we take care of that for you. Our next question is some responsible gaming examples. So just like we did before, we looked at responsible gaming practices that players can take. What are some examples of responsible gaming policies and practices that you guys have either worked to put in place or seen be successful, things like that? Phyllis, do you want to maybe start us off with that one?
Sure. So the things that I put into place are obviously the self-exclusion policy that we have. That's very important to make sure that we are looking and taking action for when we see a player that is having difficulty. So we put that into place, and with that, I've also put rules as to, it's not just give a customer a piece of paper, you sign this, you're done. I don't want to see you for 30 days or 60 days or whatever. It's sitting there explaining to the customer, we see that this is becoming troublesome for you, and we'd like you to take some time away and just step back for a little bit and give them the pamphlets and information that's necessary and read the information to them, not just, here's the paper, go on. There's your day. So it's still customer service, making sure that we are talking to our guests and looking for these things and explaining everything. And the days of you're here, you violated your self-exclusion, off to the police you go type of abrupt type of gaming, responsible gaming, it's just not what we do anymore.
Yeah. That's good to hear that, you're focusing on not just doing what's in the policy, but really taking a few minutes to breathe with the person and treat them as a human and understand what they're maybe dealing with and try to get them some help there. That's really excellent. Kara, did you have any examples or thoughts you wanted to add?
Sure. I love what you just said. The humanistic approach to our businesses, whether it be, in leadership roles, right? Taking the lead on managing our team members as well as guest needs. And, I think it really starts with strategy. Establishing a program is so important. It's certainly important to our organization. A program that's perpetual, that's transparent, that's easy to understand for all parties as it relates to detection and access to information and awareness. Establishing house rules that include age requirements to engage in gambling, that's an easy one. Engagement is certainly important on many levels, from awareness to training. One of the easiest things we can do as businesses is to create awareness, and there's many ways to do that. There are varying scopes and sizes and, capabilities of casinos depending on the business model. And so tagging brand campaigns and other collateral with hotline or which offers support to those that may want to seek guidance and further support, as we aren't the subject matter experts, the mental health providers, those that putting people in touch with those that can really offer some help doesn't require a large investment of money or time. Also, frontline team members, and I think this is really a big one, at a casino venue are trained at our place to understand the indicators that may require attention, but because our team may not encounter these situations frequently, and there's so many other skill sets they need to continue to focus on in such a highly regulated environment, and to really produce their jobs and engage people to have fun and so programs that are simple and memorable for our team and for our guests, with easy access to help those impacted by gambling addiction to find the support they need, or even understand what the indicators are. Training is mandatory here at ALNA, just like mandatory alcohol service training. So rotating those into your regular required training programs is something that's easy to do. And I would say, finally, to respond to the question about self-exclusion programs at ALNA, a voluntary self-exclusion program we do offer, that offers our guests who believe they have a gambling problem to be given information at that time. They can request that the casino can prohibit them from entering the premise. And as we provide the data, that may be helpful, and then finding ways to help guests avoid gambling at our properties. And technology really comes into play to assist us with this. So we certainly work with those guests to make sure we honor their request, and we're able to follow through on that in the event that they do show up and they use their loyalty card and we see they're at a game. We're able to engage them immediately and help them get back on the right path. And really follow through any treatment programs. And if and when they're ready to come back, you had mentioned earlier, treating people like humans and being respectable. And I think it's important that we have regular meetings to monitor our initiatives and programs to make sure they make the most sense for your business and they're actually effective. So large investments aren't necessarily necessary because there's so many resources out there, such as Evergreen Council on Problem Gambling, that we rely on as well to train our team and keep us privy to all of the latest practices and resources available to us.
Yeah. And Jennifer, I thought you might have something you might want to add to that, and you may also be able to take the question that came in. Maureen added about what are the employees, what's their role? They're not counselors, but what can they do, et cetera, when they do want to be able to interact with the customer and treat them like a human, and how they might respond. What are your thoughts on that?
Definitely. So we created it when I was at Caesars, and I can't believe 18 years ago, we created a program that was called an RG Ambassador. And we did a lot of research around this program because, you know, we wanted to make sure that employees could do this, and we found that they can. It's quite easy. And it's a training that we're doing now through the RG Star program with the Evergreen Council. But basically, an RG ambassador is a specially trained employee that will proactively engage a customer about responsible gaming, especially when there's concerns that they may not be gambling responsibly. And the way we become alerted to them not gambling responsibly is because at some point, they verbalized something. It could be a direct statement, I've got a gambling problem. They happen, but they're rare. But it could be indirect statements. It's about 15 years into the program, we actually went through an entire database of every statement that had been made that caused concern. And not surprisingly, most of them are around money. I just spent all my rent money. I don't have gas money to get home. I'm going to lose my house. Whatever it is, there's something that they verbalize. And again, customer service, all employees are specially trained in customer service. All we're asking them to do is listen to customers. And if they say something that concerns you, report that. And it doesn't have to mean you're deciding this person has a gambling problem. You are just concerned, because everybody understands when they're concerned about something. It doesn't have to be a specific statement. It's somebody says something, I know if this is a joke, I know if I'm concerned. So they report that, and then these ambassadors will actually go and speak to that customer about the concern. And to Julie's point earlier, she was talking about motivational interviewing, and that's exactly what this type of conversation is based on, is getting the individual to sort of examine why they made that statement, and if they need to make changes, what can they do differently to be able to try to address the situation, and then also to give them resources that they can seek for assistance. So things like the helpline number, the Evergreen Council's information, maybe GA sessions in the area, counselors in the area, whatever that is, but making sure that they are a conduit to seeking assistance. Because again, as we've stated, they're not counselors. They're not there to convince this person they have a problem. They're not there to diagnose anything. All they're there to say is, we care about you. You've said some things that concern us. Maybe you should think about doing something differently. And if you want to make changes, here's some resources that might help you.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you. And while we're on the subject of examples, we've had a comment come in from Maureen. Rob, if you want to pull that over about self-exclusion, because that's come up a little bit here. Does self-exclusion just mean not coming to venue? Does it stop marketing and player promotions? Which that's a big thing. If I self-exclude, but then I'm still getting all the advertisements, that's not ideal. So how does that process work?
Any one of us, or how would you?
Any one of you, yeah.
I could speak to what we do here. This is where the technology helps. So when working with that client, if they ask us to not solicit them to come back, they're looking to avoid us for a while, maybe they need a break, and we're able to go into our system and access their account and note the account. So essentially we freeze the account. So if someone comes in and utilizes their Players Club card, let's call it, we will detect that they're here immediately and engage that customer in a conversation to see if there's anything that we can do to help. And if they do formally self-exclude, it means asking them to leave, and also means they will not receive any marketing material from us, no more direct mail, email, solicitation, and otherwise.
Good. Good. And no free plays.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. And then our last question for you guys, and then we'll get to any more Q&A that might come in from the chat feeds. What are the limitations of responsible gaming policies and practices? So what can they not do, right? Jennifer, do you want to take that one first?
Sure. There's so many. I'll hit a few. The first one I would say, and this again goes back to Ricky and Julie's conversation earlier, is about responsible gaming is about prevention, especially when you're talking about from a venue perspective. But a lot of customers equate responsible gaming with problem gambling. So they completely ignore all of the prevention efforts because they think, well, that's not for me because I'm not a problem gambler, which is not what this is about. This is about prevention and teaching those odds and teaching them how to set limits before it becomes problematic. So that is one thing of what do we even call this to get customers to engage in it? Another one is third party. So if a third party comes to a venue and says, you need to keep my spouse out of here, my husband's spending all of our money, we're very limited as a venue of what you can do with that. You can potentially have a conversation with the spouse, but you have to get the permission of the third party to do that. It can get very, a lot of legal aspects. And we know that, with problem gambling, there could be domestic violence issues. So we can't get in the middle of that. So that's another limitation. I would also say self-exclusion. There's limitations to self-exclusion. Is self-exclusion a therapeutic tool for the individual, or is it an enforcement tool by the casino or the venue? And what I mean by that is, once I sign a self-exclusion form, as an individual, basically it means that I should be changing what I'm doing and being an active role, playing an active role of not going back to the venue and of seeking assistance or treatment. What it doesn't mean is I sign this form and now it's the casino's responsibility to keep me out. And if I come back and play, it's their fault. So I have no responsibility in this as an individual. So self-exclusion, how that's administered and what it means, can have limitations. And then the final one I would say is, we can give and connect people to resources. So during these responsible gaming conversations with ambassadors, they can give them all the resources that we have. You can't make the individual actually take advantage of it. So there's limitations on what we can do for the person.
Right. Phyllis, any other thoughts that come to mind for you on any limitations to responsible gaming? These could be practical. These could be staff-wise.
Sure. I mean, we have, Maverick has 19 card rooms throughout Washington. So if I were to, have someone self-exclude themselves from one property, technically I'm not helping them, because the only way to actually help them is self-exclude them from all properties. So that's one of the things that we felt was important when we looked at our responsible gaming policies and procedures. We have to make sure that we are getting them not only the tools of helping and getting them pamphlets and brochures and any type of information we can give them, but also make sure that we're doing our part, because we do have spouses who, yes, I want my spouse banned, don't let him come back again, I don't want them, they took all the money, whatever, for their whatever reason. And we do have to make sure that we are not just looking at one card room and one individual incident. We're looking at it as a broad, okay, every card room needs to be looked at as a whole, and we keep that person from going to each and every one. And going to marketing is a big part of that, and making sure they're not getting those advertisements and things, and otherwise the whole responsible gaming policy is for nothing. So
they can go to one Maverick location to self-exclude, and they'll automatically be self-excluded for all of them, or do they decide whether they want to be self-excluded for all of them?
If
it's just
automatic, you're self-excluded from all of them. That's the only way that we're doing our part to ensure that that person is not allowed at any of them.
Yeah, it is unfortunate, and I have had clients who had to do this, who went to every casino within a 2-hour radius of them, which was a lot, to self-exclude at every single one. Right.
Yeah. So you have a spouse there who is saying, I want them self-excluded, have them sign the paperwork, and then the next day they go to another property and they start gaming. Doesn't exactly help. So
it's nice to be able to go to one place and get several.
Right.
That's nice. Yeah. Any other thoughts from you guys on this? And then I'm going to pull Julie and Ricky back in with us. And we've got a few other questions that came in the chat we can go through.
I mean, I guess I'll say a couple of words. I think that, Phyllis and Jennifer covered a lot. And I think I'll just add that as it relates to practice, detection can be really difficult. We have a dynamic environment. Here at ALNA, we have a large facility. There's a lot of visitation and activities happening on property. And oftentimes people appear to be having a good time or may not appear to be having a challenge. So knowing your customer and bringing forward perhaps some thought provoking practices to encourage people to step forward through visual illustrations, utilizing technology on the casino floor and around the property, or a strategic placement of brochures and collateral that individuals can discreetly access if they don't want to come forward, if that's their preference. And, some of the practical barriers around staff training, I mean, staying in front of turnover is a reality and a challenge, and ensuring the team is aware of what to look for to really assist guests. So, access to information can be a hurdle or a barrier. When we first opened A&A, just over 3 years ago, the closest mental health service provider with proper training was 30 minutes and beyond. So our primary market is in our backyard. And so we're fortunate to work for the Cowlitz Tribe, which has established programs that they have in place to support this need. The Pathways to Healing program, the health division of the tribe, that really sought out train with the assistance of Evergreen to extend treatment for those that may need support as a result of gambling at their casino, and just finally knowing your customer and ensuring you have the ambassadors in place on site on every shift. And I know there's some initiatives on the table to continue to try to integrate more. As Phyllis mentioned, Phyllis is fortunate to have multiple properties that she can leverage to try to, integrate that throughout several of Maverick's facilities. But we don't have a statewide program necessarily that creates continuity amongst all casinos. And I think getting to that eventually would really be helpful for all of us.
Right. Well, excellent. Rob, let's go ahead and bring back Julie and Ricky to join us. And one question that's come to mind for me, and this was not pre-planned, we're live, right? So this we just go with the flow, is how can we get people who are the prevention specialists, the treatment providers, and the those at the local venues to be able to have relationships so that maybe there is a casino in their local community and they want to know, where can I send people around here? How can people on both sides kind of create those relationships to work together for responsible gaming? That's kind of for anybody.
I'll start it. I think it's important that if you're an operator, that you connect with the state's Problem Gambling Council, so in this case, the Evergreen Council, because that can be your conduit to learn about all of the treatment that's available within the state or within the area, and vice versa. If the councils can reach out to the operators, I think that's important. We are working through the Evergreen Council to do the ambassador training at both Maverick and A&A. So it's important to make those connections, because that's how you're going to be able to broaden your scope and your relationships. There we go.
Yeah, absolutely. We keep a list of all of the certified gambling counselors in this state. We already know who's kind of working on this front in this state. So if someone said, hey, who's in this county, we can help connect them to who they can refer people to there. Absolutely.
Yeah, just to tack on to that too with Jennifer, who, by the way, I'm fanning over there on your viola or cello, or I want you to play. What's that?
It's a bass.
Oh, it's a bass. Okay, even bigger. I could tell the size back there. But yeah, I think in terms of, so that's from her points from an operator perspective, and my point is from a community perspective, right? So, not only are they meeting across the aisle with Evergreen and in our case with Oregon Council on Problem Gambling, it's our job too to reach out and to try to make those connections and say, how can we help you? Because we're, especially for folks who have all the knowledge that we have in this field, to be able to share the perspectives that we have and to be able to understand sort of the spectrum of care that needs to be offered, is reaching out and saying, we're here for you. And so, so from our perspective, that's a really critical point.
Excellent. And I think one thing that stands out to me is that, you know, it's two people from both sides coming at the same thing, right? Both the industry can help and promote responsible gaming, such as preventing underage gambling, as well as the players can help prevent underage gambling as well by educating their children, not buying scratch off tickets for their kids for Christmas and things like that, can both kind of work on some of the same goals. And the industry can help promote the helpline and resources and things, but also the players can read the material that they get and call the numbers that they've got resources for and things like that. There's ways that they can both be working on, you know, kind of the same goals and help to promote responsible gaming for a lot of people, their friends, their family. Yeah. Let's see.
Sorry, I don't mean to break into one other comment. Sorry, guys. I was just thinking, during listening to all of this great panel, and it's just a real delight to be able to be here, especially with operators who have a lot of compassion and care for their customers. I think RG starts before us. It starts before all of us, and it starts after all of us, and it continues after all of us. So when we think about like how the games are manufactured, what's happening on the design level, the programming level, there's so many elements that could be implemented before us and then be evaluated after us. So as much as we can do, it's still there needs to be a lot more.
Right. How do you feel we should be using new technology to help with responsible gaming? Some of you might not have seen this, but our last ECPG Live was on cashless casinos. So we talked a lot about this whole tech piece. We did have someone from IGT come on as a guest expert there. So tune into that if you want some more information from that conversation. But yeah, there is more technology coming out. How can that be used? If the technology is there, say for cashless casino or just better data collection and knowing your customer better, how can that also be used for responsible gaming efforts?
I mean,
Jennifer, I'm thinking you might have some ideas. Or Kara, are you going to say something here?
I did watch that chat, and technology in our company vision, we have a high focus on technology and evolving our business model. It's certainly hard to keep up in this industry, and that's what makes it so exciting. But I think people more than ever want to control their own experiences, and people don't want, and ultimately don't want to be controlled. So offering them opportunities and ways to maybe set timing limits on games with reminders and those things we heard about. Some of the items on the chat, those that may tune into that after listening to this. Technology brings on so many opportunities, and I'm excited to see what's coming down the path. I agree, the R&D and the game development, there's many different things we can do. Of course, there's a lot of enticement there to keep things interesting, which is also a challenge in today's world and environment. There's so much stimulation. We're so used to the ease of access in our phones and at our fingertips, and we don't want to wait in lines and all of those things. So I think that we can bring forward different ways to make people aware of what's happening while they're in the moment, and in a way that wouldn't be detrimental to our businesses, but respectful to the players.
Right. And we did have, I think we'll take one last comment here. This one came from Maureen. And on the others that we've kind of missed during the conversation, we will send them around so we can do a Q&A. We call it an ECPG Extra, because we usually have comments that we can't get to during the live, and also some that might come in after it's aired that are good. So we'll send those around to get some more info on those. But this last one that came in here, which is on sports wagering, and how will that look on responsible gaming? So in Washington, legalized sports wagering is going to be able to start happening in the tribal casinos. And so how will maybe the responsible gaming policies adapt to this new type of product they've got coming in?
So I'll just start my thoughts on that. So with sports wagering, I think one of the things we're going to have to really look at is what types of betting you can do. So are you doing betting within the game? So how many bets can you make? How quickly can you make them? On what different things can you make them? So when you look at online, especially in sports betting, it happens rapidly, and you can bet constantly in game on a lot of things. It's not like, you know, buying who's going to win the game and waiting till the end. So we need to be aware of that, and look at strategies for that. It's also going to be a younger male customer. So again, we're going to have to look at how do we target that group in a special way to talk to them about it. And then it's going to be people that think they have skills and knowledge that you can study a roster and know, you know, it's just like fantasy sports. You think you know who's going to win, or you have this knowledge that's going to make you do better. But we have to really hone in on what are the odds. What this is really actually gambling, and you don't have any special knowledge that's going to make you know who's going to win this. So I think there's a lot of components there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you all very much for joining us and taking the time out of your day on a Friday to do this with us. We really appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. You can share this with anyone you like. It will automatically be recorded. Anybody can watch it after the fact. And you can tune into the last ones as well. Don't forget to check out the blog within the next week or so, because we will post some more resources on there. We'll post some more Q&A for you on this subject there. So check that out. And have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a great